Learning how to make dragon's eye rocks. So here's an example I already made. It's pretty small. You should be getting a rock a little bit bigger than this, but this is just to give you an idea of what it should end up looking like. And then today I'm going to take this rock right here, and I'm going to make another version of this just to show you guys how you can do it at home with the kits you've gotten. Alright, so what we're going to need today to make these rocks is you're going to need one plain rock. You're going to have these two brushes you got, one larger one for bigger areas and also blending, and then this smaller one here for finer details and all the lines we'll be doing. And then you'll also want a pencil in a couple areas. You could also use a pen, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to be marking a few things in before we bring the paint in. And then you should also get some pots filled with paint, and I just have the same colors you're going to get here on a little palette. You can tell by this palette that you're really not going to need much of any one color. And then you'll also get some Mod Podge just to seal everything in at the end. Alright, so we're going to get started here. We got this idea originally from a YouTube channel called Rachel's Rocks. So if you want to look that up, you can. She's got a lot of other great rock painting ideas, but we're just altering things a little bit for the sake of our kits. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is draw with your pencil or whatever other writing instrument you have. You're going to want to draw a circle right in the middle of your rock. Now, if you had, say, a compass to draw a perfect circle, that's great, but you can also just sort of eyeball it. So I'd say the first thing you want to do is put a dot right where you'd say the middle of your rock is. Let me make that a little bit darker there. And now if you wanted, you could bring in a ruler and you could measure out around this dot just to make it fully even, but I'm just going to eyeball it, I guess, no pun intended. Try and keep it fairly even. You want it to be about half the size of the full rock. So this here, the half is about equivalent to this, and then this half is about equivalent to that. You could do a little bit larger if you'd like. So you can see I've got that marked, and what we're going to do is we're going to paint that completely white. So I'm going to take this white here, and I'm just going to fill that in completely. See, it's still a little streaky because it's got that dark background, so that's why we're going to wait, let it fully dry, and then put a second coat on. Alright, so I waited just a few minutes here. You can see it's dry to the touch. We're just going to do our second layer of the white now. Alright, so next we're going to take some of the lighter green right here, and we're going to be putting that right in the center of the pupil. So we're going to take the larger brush, probably want to wipe off any excess white that's on there. And we're going to dip it in the green and just kind of bring it down the center for now, and then just kind of blend outwards. So now we're going to take some white again, just to lighten up the very center of that pupil. So once you do that, that's pretty strong and we want to blend it out, so I would take the paintbrush again and just wipe it on a paper towel or anything you have like that, and just kind of blend it out from the center there. Now remember, dragon eyes, one of their characteristics that makes them look kind of reptilian more than human is this pupil, this kind of oblong here. So keep that in mind when you're doing all of this, that's the general shape you're looking for in the center. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit more. Alright, so now we're going to take the darker green, and for this, depending on how dark you want it to be, you can mix some of the lighter and the darker together. I'm going to do that a little bit, and this is one of those times where you're going to want to move quickly with the wet paint. If some of it's already dried in here, I've still got it a little bit wet, then you can add a little bit more in anytime you'd like. But I am going to, around the edges, not fully to the edge, but right around the edges, add some dark in. You just want to blend that as well as you can on the outside. Be careful, it's pretty easy to just bring it in too quickly and suddenly the whole thing's dark. So do your best, wipe your brush off to be pretty subtle about it. Bringing it in here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but give yourself some time. I'm going to bring in some more of the lighter green because it seems to be dry and it's not blending very well. Get that blending a little bit better. It's kind of like if any of you wear makeup with eyeshadow. You always want to blend, but it's never totally perfect and you're just doing your best. Now we're taking the skinnier brush and the darkest green, and we're going to outline this white area. So while this is still wet, ideally, you're going to want to take the line you just made and blend it outwards. Same thing as before. If you see it's kind of dried up on you, you can just kind of get the area there wet again. Just make it so it's not quite a solid line. Alright, so mine's totally dry. We're going to start drawing the pupil, and you can really do whatever you want here, but for the traditional dragon look, you're going to want this sort of shape that drops down to a point at the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw that in here, bring it all the way to the bottom, all the way down, some curve in there. Alright, so now we're going to paint that fully black. You can use either brush you're comfortable with for this one. Alright, so now that that's all filled in, we're going to want to take the dark green again and your tiny brush, because this one's going to be super tiny and very faint. You're going to want to grab some of that dark green, and you might even want to take some off, because what we're going to do next is add little veins and details into the eye here. So you're just going to take a really light hand, and as thin as you can, it's kind of a little hard, I know, but as thin as you can, draw some squiggly lines coming into the eye from each side there. gonna give it a lot of realism. Now we're going to bring in the pencil again, and we're going to draw the shape of the eye so we know where we're going to want this black to be. And you'll kind of want to start it a little bit higher and drop down a little bit more on the bottom, and then this upper one is going to be a slighter curve. I'll show you what I mean there. So I'm really just doing kind of an upside down curve here. But then I'm really going to scoop down to meet the edges of the bottom of the pupil there. Alright, so that's kind of your base, you can sort of see it. Now we're going to want to take the tiny paintbrush and we're going to do that outline that we just drew with the black paint. And this is just the outline, so try to be kind of careful, but don't worry about it too much. So there's my outline, and now we're going to take the bigger brush because we really just want to fill in everything outside of this on the top side and sort of the sides of the rock to be black. Alright, now that this is mostly dry, we're going to take the small brush again, and we're going to take the gold this time, and we are going to fully outline this eye into the black part here. Alright, so now that we've got that outline, this is where you can kind of start making your own decisions. One thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to also outline the iris in the gold. Give it some definition there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to paint this whole area black first. This is one of those situations where you can use either brush, whichever one you're more comfortable with. So that's all set. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to do another metallic outline around the iris there. Alright, so I'm going to go back in with the gold and the tiny brush, and I'm going to outline the iris. Now if you want, you can also do these kind of corner of the eye ducts here, just kind of little round half circles. You can also take this opportunity to take some black in here. So I lost this clip, but the next thing we're going to do is take our pencil again and we're going to start sketching out where we want the scales to be, and I'll show you how that looks. So I drew them in here, and what we have is the scalloped on the bottom, and then we have the second layer of scallops here, where they kind of go in between the pre-existing scallops, and there can definitely be overlaps here. But then as we go towards the top, they're kind of coming to a point, and they work like that around the corner of the eye too. And if we're saying that the snout would be on this side, then this side is the corner of the eye, and that's the direction we want these upward points to face. So they're all going to face this direction. So now we're going to start painting those individually. Now this is another area where you can choose whichever brush feels best to you. I would probably go with the bigger one. So I was really wrong here. You're probably going to want to use the small one. It makes it a lot easier. But you're going to work individually by scale. And each scale you're going to want to work quick. I wouldn't go scale by scale. I would pick one scale, quickly finish it, then move on, because within each scale you're going to want to be doing that layering of the colors and then blending them together, so you have to do that while they're still wet. Taking a bit of the light green and picking one scale to start, and I'm filling it in completely. I want to get right up against that gold outline there. Alright, and this is one of the ones where we want to work while it's wet. So, generally speaking, we want the outer portion of each scale to be darker. So I'm going to take some of the darker green, I'm going to put it on the exterior here. Oops, and I painted over the gold a little bit there, but I can go in later and touch that up if I want. So we're going to put the darker on the outside, and we're just going to kind of, you can take some of that off the brush there, just kind of work it in, blend it out a bit. Make sure there's no super hard edges. And this gives it a little more dimension for each scale. And if you want, you can also take some white and work it in to the uppermost portion there. So we're working with light on the inside and working out to a darker. So now this is probably the most time consuming part, because you're going to do this for every single scale. So I'm going to go do that and then I'll come back. Alright, so you can see I've gone in and I've painted every individual scale. It's not looking the best necessarily right now, so what we're going to do next to really give it the same emphasis as this guy is we're going to go in and we're going to take the skinny brush and we are going to outline each scale in the gold, and then once we've completed that, we're going to outline each individual scale in black. So I'm going to work this all the way around and then I'll come back. Alright, so now that I've outlined all of the scales in gold, I'm going to go in one last time with the tiny brush, dip it in the black, and outline each of the scales right outside of the gold again, and that'll give it this full definition here. So another thing you're going to want to keep in mind is in the outer layer where it goes out into the black, you're not going to need to outline the whole thing because part of it's covered in black. But in these areas where it's overlapping, like right here, so where the edge isn't always against the black, you are going to want to bring that black outline into there just to fully separate those scales out. So now once we've got everything fully outlined, one of the very last things we're going to want to do is we're going to take our tiny brush, dip it into a bit of the white paint, and we're going to do the shines on the iris there. So I like to put one right along the side here. And then you can also put a little dot right on top of that if you want. And then one or two more around the other edges. So let's see, I can put one up here. And then another down here. I'll put some dots right around there. And that definitely gives it more of a 3D look. So that's the last thing we're going to do to this rock until we seal it. And you'll want to wait at least a few hours. You could just leave it for the rest of the day and do it tomorrow. And then we're going to fully coat it in the Mod Podge, and that'll seal everything in. And then we're done. So now that we're all done here, just remember you should have gotten a slip in your kit about how you can share your finished products if you'd like. You can email it to us or you can share it with us on social media, and I'd just love to see what you guys came up with. Hope you had fun.